They say no rider can fly blind through a storm. They say lightning has a taste, that thunder has a hunger, and that clouds are graveyards where dragons go to die. Yet in the high vaults above the Shardsea, where the sky turns black as ink and the wind screams like a wounded god, there is an order of riders who do not see it all, and still they navigate the tempest as if following a road of lanterns. They ride with their eyes closed because their eyes are gone. They ride by listening to glass, and the glass is alive. This is the story of the Glasswing Pact, the oath that bound blind dragon riders to living stained glass maps, and how that miracle of magic and sacrifice carried kingdoms through storms that should have swallowed them whole. It began, as most curses do, with a victory. The War of Seven Banners had burned for 9 years across the spine of the world. Cities starved behind their own walls, rivers ran thick with ash, and above it all, dragons fought dragons, turning the sky into a battlefield where shadows tore at shadows. When the war finally ended, it did not end with peace. It ended with exhaustion, with treaties signed in trembling hands, with kings who could not sleep unless their swords were within reach, and it ended with a storm. Not a common storm, not the kind that makes peasants shutter windows and sailors pray. This was the Blackwake Tempest, a living front of cloud that crawled out of the western void like a beast dragging its belly across the world. It swallowed sunlight. It cracked towers with casual thunder. It churned the Shardsea into a froth of knives. The first time it came, it took 3 dragon lances from House Var, took them in broad daylight. The riders were veterans, their dragons scarred and seasoned, and still the storm ate them as if they were moths. The second time it came, it took the sky bridge of Haldenmere, that ancient span of stone and chain that hung between 2 peaks like a necklace of giants. The storm did not break it. It simply unmade it, dissolving mortar, rusting iron, turning the whole proud miracle into a rain of gravel. By the third time, the storm had a name spoken only in whispers: Blackwake, and every kingdom that depended on the sky routes began to choke. Because in this world, the roads were not on the ground. The Shardsea was not water, not truly. It was a vast, glittering expanse of broken crystal flats and razor dunes, where sunlight refracted into false horizons and mirages walked like ghosts. Caravans that tried to cross it were found weeks later as piles of bleached bone, their wagons sliced open by the land itself. So the kingdoms flew. They flew grain to winter cities. They flew medicine to plagued towns. They flew letters, gold, and prisoners. They flew brides to foreign thrones and assassins to foreign beds. And when Blackwake came, the sky closed. The first response was predictable, prideful, violent. The great houses sent their finest riders to break the storm as if it were an army you could charge. They brought storm spears tipped with sky iron. They brought mages who could coax fire from wet air. They brought priests with relics that had once been kissed by saints. None returned, not because the storm killed them directly, not always. Sometimes the storm simply turned them around. A rider would enter the cloud wall confident, then emerge hours later over the wrong mountain range, their dragon exhausted, their supplies gone, their mind hollowed by disorientation. Sometimes they emerged alone, the saddle empty behind them, insisting the rider had leapt willingly into the dark. Sometimes they never emerged at all. The sky roots collapsed, borders tightened, famine began to gnaw, old grudges sharpened again, and in the middle of that tightening noose, a rumor crawled from the poorest districts of Skyhold Veyrun. There was a blind girl who could read storms, not in the way sailors read waves, not by smell or omen, but by sound. She sat in the glassmaker's quarter among molten furnaces and broken panes, and she listened. When the wind changed, the glass in the windows sang. When lightning crawled behind clouds, the bottles on shelves trembled like frightened animals. She mapped the storm in her mind the way a musician maps a song. Her name was Elowen Marr. She had been the daughter of a window crafter, a man who made rose-colored saints for chapels and blue-eyed angels for tombs. When she was 10, a shard of cursed mirror taken from a looted battlefield had shattered in her father's shop. The splinters struck her face, not her skin, but her sight. Her eyes did not bleed. They simply dimmed, as if someone had pinched out 2 candles. By 13, she could no longer tell dawn from dusk. By 15, she could tell you the shape of a storm with her head tilted to a pane of glass. A Veyron courier captain, desperate and half-mad with hunger in his city, brought her before the Sky Council as a joke that was really a plea. The council laughed. The council scoffed. The council asked what a blind girl could do where seasoned riders had failed. Elowen did not plead. She did not bow. She said quietly that the storm was not random, that it had corridors, that it had lungs where it breathed and veins where lightning ran, that there were places inside it where wind fell silent and places where the thunder repeated in patterns like a heartbeat. The council demanded proof. So Elowen asked for one thing, a dragon, not a hatchling, not a tame sky lizard used for shows, a true storm-blooded drake, the kind that could hold its wings against a gale. The hall erupted. Dragons were weapons of houses, not tools for beggars. But famine makes strange bargains, and fear makes cowards of kings. In the end, they gave her a dragon no one wanted, a gray-scaled male named Karos, once ridden by Lord Avalvar, the same lord who had vanished in the first Blackwake flight. Karos had returned riderless, saddle straps torn, eyes wild, and no handler could mount him without losing fingers. They called him Widowmaker. They led him into the council courtyard in chains of sky iron. Elowen stood before him, with her empty gaze lifted toward his breath. The handlers expected blood. Instead, Elowen spoke to him in a language no one recognized. Not the harsh command tongue of riders, not the soft coaxing of stablemasters. It was low and resonant, as if she were humming words into existence. Karos stilled. His nostrils flared. His wings half spread, slowly folded. And then he lowered his head until his brow ridge touched her forehead. In that moment, those watching swore the air itself changed, as if the dragon had decided to listen. Elowen climbed into the saddle with help, because she could not see the stirrups. She did not wear a helm. She did not carry a spear. She carried only a strip of stained glass wrapped in cloth, the size of a man's hand, colored in deep cobalt and amber. The council demanded to know what it was. Elowen said it was a map. They laughed again, because it was only glass. Beautiful, yes, but useless. Then she and Karos launched into the sky. They flew toward the Blackwake wall, that towering bruise upon the horizon. Riders on the battlements watched, ready to mark the point where she vanished. She did vanish. The clouds swallowed her like a mouth. Minutes passed, then an hour, and then, as if the storm itself had been forced to spit them out, Karos burst from the far side of Blackwake, over the Shardsea, wings beating hard but steady, and Elowen was still in the saddle. She returned at dusk with her hair whipped into knots, her lips cracked, her hands trembling from cold. But she was alive, and she brought something else. She brought a root. The Sky Council convened again, quieter this time. Elowen stood before them with the same strip of stained glass, now threaded with faint lines that had not been there before, like veins forming under skin. She said the glass had changed in the storm. She said it had listened with her. And that was the first time the words living map were spoken in a royal hall. The council's mages demanded the glass for study. They held it up to lantern light. They peered through lenses. They scraped it with silver knives and found it resisted. They tried to heat it, and it did not soften. They tried to break it, and the crack sealed itself with a soft chiming sound, as if the glass were healing. One old mage, Master Soren, said the glass was not glass at all. It was dragon wing. Not the tough leather of a wing membrane, but the thin, translucent layer that forms when a dragon is still in the shell, the first veil between it and the world. In rare clutches, the veil hardens in the egg like a film of colored crystal. Most hatchlings tear through it and it is lost. But if one were to harvest it and bind it and feed it magic, you could make a thing that remembered the sky. The council asked Elowen how she had made it. Elowen said she had not. Her father had. She explained that her father had once worked under a secret commission for House Var, crafting stained glass sigils for a chapel dedicated to Saint Erwin, patron of safe journeys. The commission had brought him strange materials, powdered sky iron, ash from thunderstruck trees, and a thin sheet of iridescent membrane sealed in wax. He had called it wing glass. He had said it sang when held near a window during rain. He had made a small panel from it, a test piece, and kept it hidden because the commission ended when war began and no one came to collect it. Elowen had grown up listening to it. When she flew into Blackwake, she brought it because she believed it would listen too. And it did. That night, the Sky Council offered her everything a desperate kingdom can offer. Gold, titles, a seat at the council itself. Elowen asked for none of it. She asked for an oath that no house would hoard the roots, that no king would own the storm corridors, that the knowledge would be shared because famine did not care for banners. They refused at first. Of course they did. Power is a thing that hates to be divided. Then Blackwake returned again, earlier than expected, and the grain stores dipped lower, and the city's children began to cough with hunger. So the council agreed. They drafted the Glasswing Pact. It was written on vellum and sealed in molten crystal. It declared that the storm routes would belong to no single crown. It established a new order of riders, sworn not to house or banner, but to the sky itself. And it contained a clause that chilled even the bravest knights. To join the order, a rider must be blind, not metaphorically, not in spirit, truly blind. Because sight, Elowen said, was a liar in the storm. In Blackwake, your eyes would show you false horizons, spinning cloud walls, lightning that struck where it did not strike. Your eyes would make you panic. Your eyes would make you chase light and die. But a rider who had never relied on sight could learn to rely on something else. Sound, pressure, the tremor of air through wingbone, the subtle chime of living glass. The council called it madness. Elowen called it necessity. The first volunteers were not noble. They were men and women already broken by war. A former lance who had lost his eyes to boiling pitch. A huntress whose face had been clawed by a manticore. A priest who had blinded himself in penance for sins he would not name. They came to sky-hold Veyron and knelt before Elowen and Karos. They were given wing-glass shards, each one a sliver of stained color. They were told to sleep with it under their pillows, to hold it to their throats when they spoke, to breathe on it when they were afraid. At first it did nothing. Then slowly it began to respond, not with words, with resonance. A blind rider would run a finger along the glass and feel a faint vibration, like the purr of a cat. Another would press it to their ear and hear a distant choir of tones. Over days and weeks, the tones became distinct, like notes in a melody. Elowen taught them the language of it. Amber meant rising warm currents, safe lift. Cobalt meant cold shear, the kind that could flip a dragon. Crimson meant lightning nests, where the air crackled and tasted of metal. Green meant calm pockets, the storm's hollow bones, and the lines that formed between colors, those were the routes. The wing glass did not show a static map. It changed as the storm changed. It was not ink, it was memory. When a rider flew through Blackwake with wing glass pressed to their palm, the glass drank the storm's music and translated it into shifting patterns of light and vibration. The rider could feel when a corridor narrowed, when a wind turned treacherous, when a calm pocket began to collapse like a lung exhaling. The order took a name, half in reverence, half in fear. The Glass Wings. And the first time they opened the sky route again, the city of Veyron wept. Grain arrived, medicine arrived. Letters arrived from sons thought dead. The poor ate. The rich pretended it was their doing. But miracles always draw knives. House Var, humiliated that their lost dragon had become the banner of a new order, demanded control. They argued that the wing-glass was born of their commission, their wealth, their legacy. They sent envoys with velvet voices and steel intentions. Other houses followed. House Keld demanded a monopoly on winter routes. House Morhain offered protection in exchange for exclusive maps. Even the Sky Council began to regret the oath they had signed. Elowen refused them all, so they tried another tactic. They offered her sight. A healer from the southern temples arrived with a vial of silver liquid, said to be distilled moonlight. A witch from the Frost March brought a spider silk needle and promised to stitch new eyes from dream stuff. A court mage offered an artifact mirror that could reflect vision into empty sockets. Elowen listened to them and smiled, a small sad curve of the lips. She said if she could see again, she would become useless, because the storm would tempt her with lies. And then she said something that made the room colder than any winter. She said the Winglass did not choose sightless riders because they were weak. It chose them because they were honest. A blind rider could not be seduced by the glitter of lightning, could not chase the false sun inside the cloud, could not be distracted by the enemy dragon's silhouette when the real threat was the wind. The Winglass trusted those who had already lost something irreplaceable. The houses left offended, and that night the first betrayal struck. It came from within the order. A rider named Sir Joran Hale, once a knight of House Keld, had joined the Glasswings after losing his eyes in battle. He had sworn the pact with trembling sincerity. He had learned the tones of Winglass quickly, almost too quickly. He had become one of Elowen's most trusted captains. And he had been paid. House Keld offered him a fortune and a promise. They would elevate his surviving family, protect his children from the hunger, give his name a legacy. All he had to do was steal the Master Pane, the first Winglass Elowen's father had made, the one that seemed to teach the others, the one that held the richest memory of Blackwake. Joran did not want to do it. That is the cruelest truth. He did not wake one day as a villain. He was simply a father in a world that starved fathers into monsters. He waited until the order slept. He crept into the chapel where the Master Pane was kept, set into a simple altar of oak. It glowed faintly even in darkness, as if dreaming. He lifted it with hands that shook. And the glass chimed, not loud, not an alarm, a chime like a warning sigh. Kairos, sleeping in the courtyard, lifted his head. Elowen woke as if struck. She did not see Joran. She did not need to. She heard the wrongness in the air, the way a mother hears a child stepping where they should not step. She found him in the chapel with bare feet on cold stone. Joran fell to his knees, pain clutched to his chest, tears running down scarred cheeks. He begged her to understand. Elowen listened. Then she asked him a question so quiet it was almost mercy. Did House Keld promise to feed your children? Or did they promise to own them? Joran could not answer. Elowen took the pain from his hands. She did not strike him. She did not banish him. She did something worse. She forgave him, and she told him he could still leave, still go to House Keld, still take their gold. But he would go without the storm's blessing, because the Winglass would remember his betrayal. Joran's mouth tightened. He insisted Glass could not judge. Elowen held the pain between them. Then she pressed it to his palm. The pain vibrated violently, like a living thing recoiling. Its tones became discordant, sharp, almost painful. Joran screamed and tore his hand away. His skin was unburned, yet he clutched it as if it had been branded. From that night onward, the Order learned a new truth. Winglass did not merely map storms, it mapped hearts. The pact deepened. The training hardened. The Glasswings became not just couriers, but guardians of the sky routes. They escorted relief flights through Blackwake. They hunted sky pirates who used storms as cover. They rescued lost riders, sometimes finding them clinging to shattered saddles, babbling about lights that whispered their names. Years passed, the world adapted, and then the storm adapted too. Blackwake began to change its song. The Winglass maps grew restless. Lines shifted too quickly. Colors bled into one another. Corridors that had been safe collapsed without warning. Elowen felt it before anyone else. She would sit in the chapel with the Master Pane against her cheek, listening, and her expression would tighten as if she were hearing a familiar voice speaking in a new accent. She told the council the storm was learning. They laughed again, because those who live in palaces always laugh at warnings until the roof caves in. But the Glasswings began to vanish, not in ones and twos, in whole flights. Koros returned one night with blood on his scales and a broken harness, his eyes rolling white. He landed hard in the courtyard and roared until the stones shook. No rider was with him. Elowen ran to him, hands searching his face, whispering that old humming language. She found a strip of Winglass still strapped to the saddle. When she touched it, it sang a note she had never heard, a deep, hollow tone like a bell underwater. It was not a map. It was a warning. The next day, a messenger arrived from the western cliffs, where the storm first formed. His clothes were soaked, though it had not rained. His hair was white with salt. He claimed he had seen something inside Blackwake. A dragon. Not one of flesh and scale. A dragon made of cloud and lightning, its wings spanning miles, its eyes like spinning storm centers. He called it the tempest worm. The Sky Council dismissed him as mad. The Glasswings did not. Elowen gathered her captains. She told them the truth she had been dreading. Blackwake was not merely weather. It was a creature, or a prison, or both. Something ancient had been sleeping in the western void, and the war's blood and smoke had woken it. The storms were its breath, the lightning its nerves. The corridors were not random paths, but the channels of a living body. And now, it had noticed the glasswings crawling through its veins. It had begun to hunt them. The Order faced an impossible choice. If they stopped flying, the kingdoms would starve and fracture, and war would return. If they kept flying, they would be feeding riders to a storm that had learned their language. Elowen proposed a third path. They would not merely navigate Blackwake, they would bind it. It was madness. It was blasphemy. It was exactly the kind of plan that gets heroes killed and legends born. The binding required a thing no kingdom wanted to give, a dragon's sacrifice. Not the dragon's life necessarily, something more intimate, its wings. Elowen explained that wing glass came from the first veil of a hatchling, but the master pain, the kind that could hold an entire storm's living map, would require an adult dragon's wing membrane, willingly given, shed in ritual, infused with the dragon's own storm memory. No dragon would allow it by force. The pain would drive it feral. The glass would crack with hatred. It had to be a pact. Dragon and rider agreeing to be diminished so the world could endure. Karos listened as Elowen spoke, her hand on his neck. His breath steamed. His heart beat like distant drums. In the end, it was Karos who chose first. He knelt. And in that moment, those who watched understood something they had never allowed themselves to believe. Dragons were not merely mounts. They were peoples. The ritual was held on the highest platform of Skyhold Veyron, where the wind was thin and the stars felt close enough to touch. Mages traced circles of powdered sky iron. Priests sang old hymns. Glassmakers, Elowen's kin, heated furnaces until the air shimmered. Elowen stood before Karos with a blade of obsidian that had never tasted blood. She wept as she lifted it, not because she doubted the necessity, but because love does not make sacrifice easy. She spoke to Karos in that humming tongue. He answered with a low rumble that shook her bones. And then she cut, not deep, not cruel, a precise line along the edge of the wing membrane where it met scale, where the nerve endings were thick with sensation. Karos roared, a sound of pain and pride entwined, and the sky answered with thunder even though the night was clear. The membrane peeled away in a single translucent sheet, shimmering with colors that did not exist in ordinary light. It was stained by the dragon's life, by every storm he had flown, by every lightning strike he had dodged, by every scream he had heard in battle. The glassmakers caught it in frames of silverwood. They lowered it into molten crystal mixed with ash of thunderstruck trees, and the membrane did not burn. It fused. It became a vast panel of living stained glass, taller than a man, wide as a ship's sail, alive with slow-moving color. When it cooled, it did not harden into dead material. It breathed, it chimed, it shimmered as if remembering wind. They called it the Glasswing Atlas. With it, Elowen intended to do what no rider had ever done. Enter the storm's heart, not to pass through, not to flee, to speak to the tempest worm in its own language. The Sky Council tried to stop her, not out of care, but out of fear. If she failed, they would lose their miracle. If she succeeded, she would become something no council could control. House Var offered soldiers to escort her, meaning to claim the Atlas. House Keld sent assassins, hoping to destroy the Order, rather than let it belong to all. Even within the Glasswings, doubt spread like mold. Some argued the pact had been to navigate storms, not to challenge gods. Elowen listened to every argument. Then she chose her flight. She took Karos, wings now ragged at the edges but still strong. She took 3 riders, Mira Ashfall, whose laughter could cut through despair. Brother Kale, the penitent priest who feared nothing because he believed he deserved death. And Sir Tovin Rook, a former sky pirate who had joined the Order for Redemption and still carried too many knives. And she took the Atlas, mounted in a harness between Kairos's shoulder spines, where it could drink the storm directly. They launched at dawn. Blackwake waited. As they approached, the storm wall towered like a continent of cloud. Lightning flickered within, not random now but patterned, like eyes blinking. Elowen pressed her palm to the Atlas. It sang, not the gentle tones of navigation, but a chorus so vast it felt like standing inside a cathedral organ. Colors shifted under her fingertips. Lines formed and dissolved. The Atlas was not merely mapping Blackwake, it was conversing with it. They entered. Inside, the world became sound and pressure. Wind slammed into them from angles that should not exist. Rain struck like thrown gravel. Thunder rolled not above but beneath, as if the storm had depth like an ocean. Mira shouted something, but it was ripped away. Brother Kale began to pray, the words torn into fragments. Tovan held tight, knuckles white, his bravado stripped down to raw terror. Elowen did not flinch. She leaned into the storm as if leaning into an old song. The Atlas guided them through corridors that pulsed like arteries. Green pockets opened, brief moments of eerie calm where rain hung suspended and lightning paused mid-crawl. In one such pocket they saw it, a shape moving behind the cloud layers. Vast, coiling, a silhouette of wing and spine made of rotating storm bands. Lightning crawled across it like nervous fireflies. The tempest worm. It turned slowly as if scenting them. And then the storm screamed. A gale hit them head-on, so strong it nearly tore Mira from her saddle. Kairos fought it, wings beating, muscles straining. The Atlas vibrated violently, its colors flaring crimson and black. Elowen realized with a cold clarity that the storm was not merely trying to kill them. It was trying to separate them, because the pact was not between rider and storm alone. It was between rider and dragon. Break that bond, and the Glasswings were nothing. The worm struck with a bolt of lightning so thick it looked like a spear thrown by a titan. It slammed into the air beside Kairos, exploding into a web of crackling branches. The shock wave flipped Tovin's dragon, a smaller bronze drake named Sable, and sent them spiraling. Elowen heard Tovin scream vanish into wind. She reached for the Atlas, trying to find a corridor to him, but the lines twisted, confused, as if the storm were deliberately lying now. Then she understood the twist. The storm was not lying. Someone was. A new sound threaded through the Atlas's song, a discordant note like metal grinding on glass. It did not come from Blackwake. It came from the Atlas itself. Elowen's stomach tightened. Tovin Rook had been too eager to redeem himself, too useful, too conveniently placed near the Atlas. He had been planted. House Var, desperate to reclaim control, had offered him a pardon and a ship full of gold. All he had to do was corrupt the Atlas's frame with a sliver of voidstone, a mineral that drank magic and twisted it. Hidden in the harness, it would make the Atlas misread corridors at critical moments. And now, in the storm's heart, the trap sprang. Elowen could not see the voidstone, but she could hear its hunger, that grinding note. Kairos roared, sensing danger not from wind, but from betrayal. Elowen made a decision that would haunt songs. She let go of Tovan, not because she wanted him dead, because chasing him would doom them all. She guided Kairos deeper, toward the worm's heart, while Mira and Brother Kale fought to stabilize their own flight. Behind them, Tovin and Sable vanished into a wall of cloud. Elowen's throat tightened, but she did not scream. She swallowed grief like a blade. The storm corridors narrowed. The Atlas flickered, fighting the Voidstone's corruption. Colors bled. Lines snapped. Blackwake's heart approached, a place where thunder became constant, where lightning formed a cage, and in that cage the tempest worm coiled around something. Not treasure, not prey, a wound in the sky, a tear, thin as a hair but stretching for miles, shimmering with a darkness deeper than night. The western void, the place Blackwake had crawled from. The worm was not guarding it, it was holding it shut. Elowen's breath caught. The storm was not the enemy, it was a seal. The worm was a living lock, keeping something worse from spilling into the world. The war had weakened the sky's seams, and the worm had awakened to stitch them close with storm and fury. And the glass wings flying through its corridors had been like ants crawling over a scar. Irritating, threatening, not malicious, but dangerous. Elowen pressed her hand to the atlas and spoke aloud, not in the council's tongue, not in the writer's command speech, but in the humming language she had used with Kairos since the beginning, a language of resonance. She offered the pact, not dominance, not conquest, partnership. She promised the worm that the glass wings would stop carving random routes through its body. They would fly only where the storm allowed. They would carry aid and keep kingdoms alive, yes, but they would also become wardens, watching for those who sought to widen the tier. In exchange, the worm would open corridors when famine threatened and close them when warlords tried to use the storm as a weapon. The worm turned its head. Its eyes were cyclones within cyclones. Its gaze fell upon Kairos, and for a moment the air stilled. Then the worm exhaled. Lightning did not strike. Thunder did not roar. Instead, the storm's sound changed. The atlas's discordant grinding note rose, as if the voidstone were reacting to the worm's presence. The corruption surged. Mira cried out. Brother Kale's prayer broke into sobs. Elowen realized the worm would not accept a pact built on a tainted map. The voidstone was an insult, a poison brought into its heart. There was only one way to cleanse it, to feed the voidstone something it could not swallow, a dragon's willing memory. Elowen turned to Kairos and placed both hands on his neck. She whispered thanks for every flight, every scar, every moment he had chosen her. Then she did what no rider had ever dared. She unhooked the atlas from his harness. The wind tried to tear it away. She clung to it, muscles screaming. Mira tried to help, but Elowen shouted her back with a single word. Trust. Elowen pressed the atlas against Kairos's wounded wing edge, where membrane had been taken. The living glass drank his pain, his courage, his fury. It flared with color so bright it burned through the storm's darkness. The voidstone's grinding note became a shriek, and then silence. The atlas chimed once, pure and clear. The corruption was gone. But Kairos sagged as if something essential had been poured out of him. His wings beat slower. His breath came ragged. Elowen held him upright with her voice, humming that old language, begging him to endure one more moment. The worm watched, and then, slowly, it unfurled a wing of cloud and lightning and touched the atlas. Not physically, but in resonance. The atlas responded, its colors aligning into a pattern so complex it felt like a new constellation. A map not of routes through the storm, but of the storm's purpose. The worm accepted. The pact was sealed, not on vellum in a council hall, but in living glass and living thunder. The storm around them shifted. The corridors widened. The wind eased, and far behind, in the chaos, Mira spotted something tumbling through cloud. A dragon, sable, and clinging to her saddle. Tovin Rook, half-conscious, battered, but alive. The storm had not killed him. It had judged him. It had stripped him of certainty, of pride, of the illusion he could bargain with powers he did not understand. Mira caught his harness line and hauled him close, snarling curses that even thunder could not drown. Tovin wept, not from pain alone, but from the crushing weight of what he had almost caused. Elowen did not forgive him, as she had forgiven Joran. Not yet. Some betrayals require more than mercy. They require restitution. The flight returned to Veyron days later, limping, exhausted but changed. Kairos landed like an old warrior, his wings scarred and ragged, his eyes steady. Elowen dismounted with hands that trembled, not from fear but from the knowledge she now carried. The Sky Council demanded answers. The noble houses demanded control. The priests demanded to know whether she had spoken to a god. Elowen told them the truth. Blackwake was a seal on a wound in the world. The tempest worm was its guardian. The glass wings would continue to fly, but under new law. No more war flights through Blackwake. No more dragon lances smuggled under cloud cover. No more assassins carried in storm corridors. The storm routes would be for life, not conquest. The houses raged, they threatened, they plotted. Then the storm came again, and this time it did not swallow the city. It curved around it, like a beast choosing not to bite. The skies above Veyron cleared while the horizon still boiled. A corridor opened, calm and green, stretching like a bridge made of wind. Grain ships flew through. Medicine, builders, hope. The people saw it and understood what the nobles refused to accept. The storm was no longer merely an enemy. It was an ally, if treated with respect. In the months that followed, the Glasswings became more than couriers. They became diplomats between flesh and weather. They mapped not only routes but moods, learning when the worm was restless, when the tear in the sky strained, when the storm needed to close and tighten like a bandage. They also became targets. Warlords tried to kidnap them. Mages tried to replicate Winglass without sacrifice, creating brittle copies that shattered in the first gale. Priests denounced them as heretics who bargained with thunder, and yet the order endured, because it was built on those who had already lost everything sight could offer. Elowen grew older, her hair silvered. Her hands became lined with the fine cuts of glasswork. She never regained her eyes, and she never sought to. Karos flew less, his wings never fully healing, but he remained the order's beating heart. Hatchlings born in Veyron's eyrie were raised hearing the Atlas's song, and some, in rare moments, would tilt their heads as if listening to a voice beyond human hearing. Tovin Rook did not die in a dungeon. Elowen refused that easy ending. Instead, she bound him to penance. He became the Order's ferryman in the lowest skies, guiding ground caravans along the Shardsea's edge, where crystal dunes could slice a man in half. He carried supplies to those the dragons could not reach. He learned humility the hard way, one blistering step at a time. Joran Hale returned to House Keld and found his promised rewards had been lies. His family had been taken as leverage, not protected. He crawled back to Veyron with nothing but shame and a desperate plea. Elowen did not welcome him with open arms. She welcomed him with work. He spent years crafting winglass frames, his fingers bleeding, his pride ground down into something useful. And one day when he pressed a finished shard into his palm, it did not recoil. It chimed softly. Not forgiveness, but possibility. So the Glasswing Pact held, not because kings honored it, because storms did. And now when Black Wake rises on the horizon, when the sky bruises and the wind begins to scream, the people of the Shardsea do not only fear, they listen. They listen for the chime of living stained glass carried on dragonback. They listen for the hum of blind riders singing to their mounts in that resonance language older than thrones. They listen because they know now that the world is not held together by stone walls and sharp swords. It is held together by agreements, by sacrifices made willingly, by the courage to navigate not with eyes that can be deceived, but with senses that can be trained to truth. And here is the thought that lingers long after the last thunder fades. If a storm can learn, if a storm can judge betrayal and accept a pact, then what else in this world is listening, waiting for us to speak to it properly? What other monsters are not monsters at all, but wardens misread by frightened eyes? And if the sky itself can be wounded, stitched shut by a dragon made of lightning, then one day when the tear widens again, when the worm grows tired, when Black Wake can no longer hold, will the Glasswings be enough? Or will the world need a new pact, paid for with something even dearer than sight?